Welcome to this episode of our property investing channel, where we bring you practical tips and strategies to help you maximize your profit and reduce your risk in your property investing journey. This is your host, Amis Sahat, and today we're going to be talking about development, renovation, and the costly mistake that you can easily avoid. And in order to explore this topic, I have invited Audrey Whisker, Director of Whisker Architecture, who is also a registered architect. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Audrey to our show. Audrey, thank you very much for being here.
Hi, Amir. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So tell us about yourself, your experience, and your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am obviously the director of Whisker Architecture. Whisker Architecture launched in September 2020. So we had our eyes wide open going into what was a very disruptive commercial environment. Our firm has been created on the ideas of sustainability and accessibility. So that is embedded into all of our projects. And that comes from a core belief of mine that we only have one planet and everybody deserves to feel included on that planet.
Absolutely.
And that feeds into our tagline of live in your values. So that's our why. It's about whether it's a home that we're designing or a school or a workplace. It's about the client's space reflecting what's important to them. So that means that we believe that where we live, where we learn, where we work, it supports who we want to be, how we want to live. And if we are supported in that fashion, then we have more capacity for empathy, more capacity for kindness and generosity. And that's a world that we want to be a part of building.
That's fantastic mentality. I really love your mindset. So just tell us how your work process looked like from inception to practical completion date, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So we break our projects down into 4 stages. We try and keep it simple for everybody. We start off with a master planning stage, and that's sometimes called a feasibility study by some other consultants as well. So that's where we start from refining the blue sky thinking down to what's the actual real brief of the project? What are the constraints? Are we going to have a budget and scope alignment? From that point, we refine down the functional brief and the aesthetic outcomes during the design phase. The third phase then is the contract documentation stage, and that's where we start really looking at controlling the risk of our clients. So that's a very important part of the documentation stage. And then finally, the last stage is the contract administration phase. So that's where we're watching what's happening with the builder actually turning those dreams into a reality and making sure that everything still aligns from that first master plan stage all the way through to the time that the keys get handed over.
Absolutely. So you mentioned builders, and whenever we talk about builders, there are some problems about managing builders, architects, and other stakeholders in the construction process. And many builders basically tell their clients not to use an architect, particularly in certain type of projects. So tell us why that happens and why basically architects and builders don't get along time to time, not on all the projects, but it happens. It is not, something that we are not familiar with. And what are the best types of project that adds the maximum benefit to the client when engaging an architect?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that projects that we work on as a firm, we don't have that problem with builders because the builders that we're working with are the ones that want to work with an architect. They prefer to have an architect involved in the process, and they prefer to have, where possible, the architect involved on site as well. And the reason for that is because their level of experience and their level of ambition for high quality projects means that an architect needs to be involved. And a lot of the time they prefer to have the architect involved on site as well, because then we're constantly there to answer any questions or help them troubleshoot. But we're also there as a third party to the contract. So we are administering the contract, which means that we have the ability to take the emotion that the client might be feeling out of the equation and look objectively at what the builder is asking for, with a lot of experience as well. So if the builder comes to us and says, look, we've got a variation that we need to charge because of X, Y, Z, we can look at it and know whether that's reasonable, whether there's another solution to the problem that maybe works in favor of both parties. And we're not going to be as emotionally involved in that. So we don't have that problem with our builders, but I understand that if there is a mismatch between the builder's experience with, say, custom designs and their ambition to create that high level of design output, that they might not be interested in dealing with an architect because they want to build the things that they've built before, the way they've built them before, and they're very happy doing that, which is
I
fine.
think custom design was a key term that you mentioned. So if a client wants a custom design, they cannot find that design, you know, everywhere. So they have to use an experienced architect like yourself to provide them with that quality design so that they can achieve their objective. And that is exactly what I meant. When builders prefer not to work with architect is probably the type of projects that they do it in-house, like massive builders. They don't normally use, you know, external architects because they have to design themselves and they want to avoid any sort of customization because it affects their construction process, it affects their running costs and everything. So that really depends on what the clients want at the end of the day. Better design quality, you know, it is impossible without having an experienced architect on site and, you know, before starting that project for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that is the key moment that a person or a client has to ask themselves whether they have to engage a builder first or an architect first when they want to proceed with the project. So what is your idea on that?
My preference is always that they come to an architect first, but I'm biased. But you're right. So if you're looking at a custom design, if you're looking at an extension or a renovation, a lot of the feedback we get from builders is that they get frustrated with people calling them going, how much will it be to put a bedroom and a bathroom upstairs in this house? Or how much would it be for us to have a 3-bedroom house in Elstonwick? Or whatever the question might be. The builders get frustrated, or these builders are getting frustrated because they're being asked, how long is a piece of string? There's so much variable in that.
Absolutely.
If clients are after a custom design, they need to talk to an architect first, because during those preliminary stages, we will narrow down the scope of works. We will see if there's a match between the project scope and the client's budget. We will be able to give a builder more information, but it's a difference between whether or not you're after a service of a tailor-made solution to your land, and often extensions and renovations require a custom solution because there are a lot of existing parts already there. Or if the client is after a house as a product. So if it's a house as a product, then going to a bulk builder directly, looking at their catalog and saying, I want option A, is a valid option for a lot of homeowners. But that's the difference, is whether or not you're after something that is custom because either your needs require something custom or your site requires something custom. Or if you've got a blank subdivision in Mernda, for example, you know exactly what you're dealing with because it's a blank slate, then you can go to a bulk builder and say, I'll take option 23, for example.
And it is very important actually during the due diligence phase of a project as well to engage the right team. For instance, if you're buying a development site, many people buy a site and then go to an architect and say, okay, how many units I can put on this property? And the architect look at the land and just said, nothing. You know, this land, you know, has so many issues that you cannot even build on it, you know, in terms of development, you can buy only one. So why did you buy this property in the first place? And that is the problem. People need to understand using the right team at the right stage. So for instance, for a development project that I mentioned, using an experienced architect that can help you to validate, and as you mentioned, basically do that feasibility study to give you the confidence that that land is developable, is a great help, because you're going to spend a lot of money on that site, and if you cannot achieve what you're going to achieve, what was the purpose? And people make those mistakes, and that costs them a lot of money. So in that context, when is the best time to engage an architect when you're trying to basically achieve maximum profit through development projects?
I think that's the main thing that you need to focus on there, is that the word profit. A development opportunity is not a passion project. It is a business opportunity.
Absolutely.
You need to know that the figures are going to add up, and ideally you want those figures to add up, and to minimize your risk and control that risk from the earliest stages possible, ideally before you pay for the land. So if you're going to be doing a development, I would be recommending talking to an experienced professional before you settle on the land.
Many people said, I don't want to use a professional architect, a person who can help me in investment, because they cost money. So in their response, these are the costly mistake that you should avoid, because spending a few $1,000s on getting a right advice at the right time can save you lots of money down in the track. So that was a fantastic point that you mentioned, Audrey. Thank you very much for mentioning that.
I'll jump in there. There's a great quote, and I can't remember who said it, and I'm probably misquoting it, but the general gist is, if you think a professional is expensive, you should see the cost of an amateur.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I like that.
So
Or
consider it an investment in making sure that you don't end up paying twice to $10,000 to $100,000 or 100 times more on the mistake by buying the wrong piece of property.
absolutely. And there is another quote which I really like, is that sometimes to save more money, you have to spend more. And
Yeah.
that's a wisdom there. And we really need to understand that real estate development is a team sport, and we can't be successful on our own because it requires different set of skills. I've seen so many people that claim that they have all the knowledge about developments. They talk like builders, architect, town planners, investment consultant at the same time, and they said, "Oh, look, come to me, I'll do it for you." And it is absolutely impossible, because you cannot play football with one person. You just need 11 people in that field, and that's a very important information that people need to consider before making any decision. So we talked about architect and builders, and in the process of some development projects, we hear the role of town planners. So tell us about their role in that development process, and in what types of projects we need to engage them, and how they can cooperate with architects.
So I have a confession in that we have never actually worked, or I personally have never worked with a town planner before. That's not to say that they don't have a very, very valid role in the development world. So we do all of our town planning submissions in-house, and we ensure that the site coverage and the building heights and the overlooking rules are all compliant. But that said, that our firm mostly does single residential work, sometimes small townhouse developments, and are usually on relatively straightforward sites. So for example, general residential zone 1. The other projects that we do, the larger school projects we do, are run by a state government system, so they're not impacted by the local council processes. So our firm is in some ways a little bit unique in that we haven't needed a town planner yet, but town planners are really important on larger developments, on where there's a lot of subdivision being planned, any development where you've got a particularly tricky site, or if you know that there is already going to be resistance in council to the proposal that you're making, because a town planner is an expert in the town planning rules, regulations, overlays, and schemes, and they will be the ones best equipped to unravel the rules that are in black and white and to make the arguments back to council why they should let you do what you're planning on doing.
Fantastic. So we talked about development projects, not in details, just, we touched the surface. Let's touch on renovation projects. How can an architect help clients in their renovation projects in terms of creating clarity for them, helping them to achieve quality of life, sustainability, as you mentioned, and other things that they're looking for?
Yeah, so I think before we touched on the idea that a custom solution is required for renovations and extensions because you've already got a lot of pieces on the board already. So in that respect, architects are very well trained to be problem solvers. So we take the time to understand what's there, what are the constraints, what are the opportunities, what can we work with from the existing structure and look at in a unique way to make an elegant solution. We talk about renovations being a bit like surgery. You've got a million moving parts. There's often the time constraint of the client having moved out for the renovations to happen. So the clock is running of how much everything is costing the client. So you really want to be able to make sure that you're doing it as efficiently as possible. And that's where an architect's particular abilities come in. So it's also worth noting that most of our clients are really surprised by how much in depth we go with the questions that we're asking them, because we're not just asking them about what they need now, we're asking for them for what they need in the future. So we might be asking quite personal questions like, do you plan on selling in the next 5 to 10 years? Or are you planning on having another child? Or how much do you value the environment? Or how much do you want to control your electricity bills? Do you have elderly parents, or does anybody in the house have health concerns that we need to work with? So understanding those needs means that we can provide a lot more value back to our clients and make sure that what they're doing is future-proofed.
From what you mentioned about the question that you ask from your client, I can easily understand that you're trying to create clarity for them in the first place, because we need to understand why we are renovating in the first place. Are we renovating for profit, or are we renovating for improving our quality of life? And whether we go for profit or quality of life, we're going on very, very different paths. They're called renovation, but renovation for profit, in my point of view, is very different from renovation for improving quality of life, because the investment objective at the end of the day is maximizing your profit with minimum risk in the shortest time. And if I tick all those boxes, for me, that's a successful investment achievement. But for people who are trying to achieve quality of life, that's another path. So that comes to, if I want to basically improve my quality of life because I'm living in my dream home and I would prefer to have a timber flooring rather than carpet. This is what I like and dislike. So tell us a little bit about, sorry, Audrey, I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, just on that point, a little bit of yes and no. If you're looking at flipping a house, if you're looking at a really quick renovate, get it back on the market, then yes, you definitely have a different approach. But there is research that's come out of Melbourne University in the last few years that for a median Melbourne house price of $1.2 million, after 10 years, the homeowner that employed an architect is over $250,000 better off than the homeowner that didn't. So as far as a longer term profit, there is definitely benefit still in engaging in
Absolutely
design. So that's just putting that out there. If you're not doing it just
Absolutely.
to the house, then it's still worth looking at good design.
Absolutely. Looking at a good design always add values, but we need to see everything in a context. For instance, if you're looking at an affordable suburbs with median price of 500 grand, spending 2 or 300 grand on that house for renovating is not, in terms of investing, it doesn't make sense, because at the end of the day, you cannot sell it with that amount of money. So you need to balance what you can achieve from that renovation if you're looking for renovating for profit. Some people trying to combine them. If they live in a house and they try to think about profit and improving the quality of life at the same time, and it is a little bit difficult to achieve, because sometimes profit, maximizing the profit, really doesn't equal having a better life. So that's
It's a balancing
personal,
act.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a personal choice. But a person who wants to specifically renovate for profit, that's another story. And improving the quality of life, for sure, using a beautiful design and innovative design can add a lot of value to that house. On that note, when we're working on a renovation project, or especially a development project which is more complex, we have so many different stakeholders. So clients, architect, builders, different tradies, councils, utility companies, neighbors, and so many different consultants, engineers, so many different stakeholders. And that adds to complexity of a construction project. And sometimes it will result in delays and additional cost. So how an experienced architect basically can reduce these problems and create a more cooperative and productive environment in order to minimize and prevent those delays and cost overruns?
Yeah. So most architects are also in some manner on their project, also running as project managers on that project. Some of the larger projects might have an independent project manager, but the architects will also be project managing. So the best way that architects can make sure that everybody's on board is by making sure that there's really clear communication. We start off all of our projects with in-depth stakeholder management meetings. So for example, really early on, we would be meeting with anybody who has really specialized input into the design of the project. So that means the clients, the user groups, the communities that might be impacted, potentially the local Aboriginal culture council as well, to make sure that we're being respectful when we're looking at the design. So all of the different stakeholder groups need to be informed of what we're planning so they can give feedback as early as possible, because what costs developers and what costs projects money is indecision. So we want to make as many of the design decisions as early as possible, so that we're not doing rework, we're not going back and redocumenting something later, we're not going back and having to resubmit to council later. We're going forwards one step at a time. And the way to do that is through due diligence, clear communication. And then once we've got all the design and documentation work done, we're making sure that we're engaging with builders who are on board with the same cause of what we're trying to achieve. So making sure that there is a good fit between the builder that wins the job and the outcome that the client's looking for is really imperative, and making sure that that communication is clear and consistent, and most of the times results in a really positive outcome for the project.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And this project management is always necessary for a successful project, because, as I mentioned, because of the numerous stakeholders that we have in construction and lack of clarity of client in most cases in the beginning, because they come to an architect, for instance, and they said, this is my budget, I want to get the best things that we have in the world, and they don't have that money to do that, and the architect have to just talk to them and understand their objectives and everything, and convince them with that budget you can achieve this. And that's a process. It cannot happen overnight. And after creating that design, that initial design or the concept design with the architect, normally it happens when the client issue tender packages, especially for bigger projects. When they issue tender packages to builders come with some prices that are normally higher than what the client expect. And again, from that point, it is a massive process, massive communication between builders, architects, and consultants in terms of how they can achieve clients' goal to bring down the price, to give them what they want, make them happy at the end of the day. And that early contractor engagement, or what they call it ECI in construction industry, is a really important part of having a successful project. If a client engages an architect in the right time, along with a builder that know what they do and they can collaborate well with architect and other consultants, I think that is a good foundation for a successful project.
Absolutely. Architects are great at what we do, and we do a lot more than most of the local public really understand. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today was to make sure that we could clear that up a little bit. But one of the things that we don't do is we don't do cost estimations. So there's a limit to how much we can be involved in those conversations. We understand that certain things cost more money, but we're not going to be experts in that field. So for example, in our firm, we use a service called ProCalc early on in our projects to make sure that our clients understand approximately what their budget would need to be to create the dream that they're after. But after that, we're really looking at relying either on that early contractor involvement, or ECI, that you mentioned, or looking towards registered quantity surveyors. So a lot of our commercial projects, for example, they would be getting a quantity surveyor's report at the end of schematic design, design development, and tender documentation to make sure that our documentation is within reason. And then if we have to work through a value management process, then so be it. It's a particularly volatile market, and just the way it is at the moment. So it's harder to predict.
And that's the nature of construction. And, people need to understand that, it is not about getting a quote from a company and just say, look, this is our budget, this is the cost, and that's it. We're seeing every day that lots of builders are going broke because of all the inflation and because of all the fixed contract that we have in the current construction industry. So people need to understand that if they are trying to make more profit through development projects or renovation, they need to understand that these types of projects require certain skills: project management, cost estimation, a clear communication, understanding what different people do. And all of these helps us to end up with a project that give us maximum profit. And we really need to understand that if we have an initial cost estimate, it doesn't mean that our project will gonna end up with that amount of money at the end of the day, because it requires a project management process. And project management means, at the end of the day, managing cost, managing time, and managing quality. And without knowing those skills, we cannot achieve our objective. So using the right team, the right architect, the right builder, the right cost planner, the right consultant, engineers, and all of those team members will help us to achieve our objective faster and with less risk. Lots of valuable information from you, Audrey. I really appreciate what you're sharing with us. So how can people find you?
Thanks for having me, Amir. People can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, at Whisker Architecture, or they can pop onto the website whiskerarchitecture.com, and they're more than welcome to book a clarity call with me at any time as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much again, Audrey, for being here today and unconditionally sharing with my audience. So if you've liked what you heard today, please like our channel. And on that note, this episode is a wrap. We'll see you guys again very soon. Bye for now.